As you can see, this is a part two of yesterday's recording of this latest chapter in the study of the book of Jacob. Reason being, for some reason, the sound completely went bonkers on this. There's no sound, which I was really ticked about. But, you know, as Pastor Jeffries said after what happened with his church, that God takes what is meant for evil and he turns it into good, and I believe it with this. And I wanted to redo this and hopefully share what God showed me from this chapter out of Genesis. And I pray that what I share with you resonates with you. I want to share a few things that maybe you don't know, or maybe you do. I don't, but some things that I learned out of this as I was studying this, and some things that I remembered when I was studying OT history. That's Old Testament history at Philadelphia College of Bible. So let's get started here, okay? I totally agree with Darlene and Lauren, I believe it was, who strongly believed that there was jealousy going on here, that Laban had a huge case of jealousy and resentment, and Lord only knows what against Jacob. Because despite everything that he had done to Jacob, God's blessing him, and he and his sons just didn't like it. So you see the end result here is animosity, resentment, jealousy. And I also noticed something else here. It seems like Rachel and Leah chose to set aside their differences because they realized the main instigator in everything was their own dad. They realized that Laban had been treating them horribly, treating them like property. Darlene really said it best, I firmly believe. I want to see if I can find it here. I saw this earlier today, and I had to see if I can find it again, because I agree. She said that Laban's envy drove him to deceive, manipulate, and control the people around him. It compelled him to use his daughters as pawns to serve his own selfish interests. It also led him to exploit his son-in-law by changing Jacob's wages 10 times in an attempt to limit his prosperity. But you see how it all backfires. And yes, his actions reflect how envy can lead to unethical behavior, strained relationships. And I very much agree. I extremely agree. That's what we're seeing here. I really think, this is my perspective, I think that there was so much animosity that if Jacob would have come to Laban and said, "We're leaving, I'm done working for you," there could have been violence. I mean, that's my perspective. But I want to get into this a little further here. As I said, I think that Rachel and Leah had been treated by Laban like property, not as human beings. And is it any wonder why they both said, "Is there still any portion or inheritance for us in our father's house? Are we not considered strangers by him? For he has sold us and also completely consumed our money. For all these riches which God has taken from our father are really ours and our children's. Now then, whatever God has said to you, do it." In other words, we're backing you up 100%. It wasn't just the jealousy, but resentment, and I think fear also on the part of Laban and his sons, because Jacob's becoming extremely powerful. He's so wealthy and powerful, their resentment is showing. I mean, I wouldn't blame them. And to see that Rachel and Leah are on the same page here, it says a great deal. And I wanted to also kind of discuss, and I can, let's say, empathize why Jacob left the way he did. I wouldn't blame him, seriously. I would not blame him one iota for how he left. I know it's a lack of faith, but he was thinking of his family, I think. Jacob was told by God he has to leave. So he is obeying God. And when God puts a desire in you on something, you listen. And as I, yes, instead of facing Laban honestly and trusting the Lord to keep his promises and work things out, Jacob fled like with his family here, like a criminal escaping justice, as Warren Wiersbe says. It was an act of fear and unbelief, not an act of faith. And Jacob, shouldn't have done that, but I understand why. I mean, he says so here. I want to read this. He says here as to why. Because he was scared. And I don't blame him for being scared. I don't blame him for being scared. But something interesting here. In the midst of all of this, Rachel's really shrewd. Rachel's shrewd here. And I find what she does really interesting. But I'm going to go back with Jacob and Laban here. I wouldn't believe one word of anything Laban said when he said that, for I might have sent you away with joy and songs with timbrel and harp. That's a bunch of BS. My thought on this is that Jacob and Laban should have talked with each other, yes. Resolved whatever issues they were having instead of Jacob running. I mean, he left like literally in the middle of the night. And you notice it took Laban and his sons 3 days to find out they were gone. And I thought something interesting here too. Do you guys see what Rachel did in response to Laban's actions, her own father? She does something very brazen and shrewd. She goes into her father's home, takes one or more of the household idols, and absconds with it. And I think it was because there was monetary value to it. She wanted to also get even with her dad for welching out on the original agreement that was between he and Jacob. But I believe, too, it was for the awful way that both her and Leah had been treated. I mean, imagine, 14 years of this, 20 years. Jacob had come there when he was 40, and now he's he's 60 or so. And who knows how old Rachel and Leah are. They've got to be maybe in their 20s or 30s. And they're ticked at their father. They're absolutely ticked. So it's no wonder why we're backing you up. Whatever God told you to do it. Let's leave. And I think Jacob was so not just scared, but angry that he said, I'm just leaving. I want nothing to do with this man. It wasn't a good way of doing it, but I understand why. And like I said, Laban finds out 3 days later they're gone, and he and his sons go out in pursuit of them. And when they finally catch up to Jacob, he basically demands, he doesn't ask, hey, why did you, matter of fact, he kind of does, but this is what he says. And I want to read this. And Laban said to Jacob, what have you done that you have stolen away unknown to me and carried away my daughters like captives taken with the sword? Like he really cares about his daughters. Why did you flee away secretly and steal away from me and not tell me? For I might have sent you away with joy and songs and timbrel and harp. And you did not allow me to kiss my sons and my daughters. Now you have foolishly in so doing. Bull spit. Pardon me here. He says, it's in my power to do you harm, but the God of your father spoke to me last night, saying, be careful that you speak to Jacob, neither good nor bad. In other words, God was saying, you hold your horses. Don't you speak good or bad to him. You discuss this with him. You think before you say something. I just did a vlog the other day about this, about how You need to think before you speak. And I think that's extremely important. I believe that Rachel did what she did because it was to secure the family inheritance. It was because it was to get even with her dad for the way he treated her and Leah, and also money. Those idols fetched a lot, and she wanted her inheritance for her and probably even Leah. But she was pissed at the way that Laban had treated her and Leah. She had it. Rachel did a bold thing here, and I don't think it was to have these idols be guidance or protection, because I believe she and Leah believed in God. I think they trusted Jacob's faith in God, at least. I think I don't know about what Darlene is saying about how taking the idols represents an inner conflict that we all face when we're confronted with change. I think this was to get even. This was to get even with Dad. This was to get even with Dad and make sure that that at least she and maybe even Leia still had an inheritance, because I think she stole more than one idol. I could be wrong. And when Jacob and Laban are finally, talking, you know, and Jacob now rips into him. To start with, Jacob says, "You really want to know the truth here? I was scared because if I did tell you we were leaving, you'd take your daughters from me by force. I'd be left with nothing. I think his vision was he'd be killed." And he's like, "As for your gods, as for your idols, because here it is." He says, "And now you have surely gone because you greatly long for your father's house, but why did you steal my gods?" And Jacob's like, "Listen, I was scared that you would never let me have my family. You'd keep your daughters by force. I'd squat. I thought you were going to jip me again." And he's like, "As for your gods, whoever's got them, kill them. In the presence of our brethren, identify what I've got of yours and take it with you." Jacob didn't know that Rachel had stolen them. He's like, "Okay, you bring them out, search everything you want. I've got nothing to hide. Whoever's got it, you deal with them." And Laban goes into everybody's tent. He goes into Jacob's, Leah's, the two maids. He doesn't find them. Now, after he leaves Leah's tent, he goes into Rachel's. Rachel is the one that took the idols, remember? And she's got him in the camel saddle and she's sitting on him. Laban's searching all around the tent but doesn't find him. She says to her dad, "Let it not displease my lord that I cannot rise before you, for the manner of women is with me." In other words, she's saying that time of the month, which I find really funny. As a matter of fact, um, during this confrontation, I want to read this because this is hysterical. Uh, Wearsby says here, "By pretending to be unclean because of her monthly period, Rachel escaped detection and further trouble with her dad." I kind of find that funny. This is just me. I find that hysterical, because what makes that hysterical is that he is such an idiot male. I'm sorry, but he is. He's an absolute idiot male, and Jacob is, again, pissed, and we're going to get into that in a moment. But he says this, and it cracks me up. It just cracks me the heck up that he does this, that he goes after Jacob. Laban goes after Jacob, and now Jacob's about ready to piss, just be so pissed. This is interesting. This is don't mind me here. This is one particular commentary here, Smith's Bible commentary, as a matter of fact. He says here, Laban really had other ideas. He really had ideas of taking by force all that Jacob had. He had ideas of perhaps even killing Jacob. But God came to him in the middle of the night and said, "Hey, don't you even talk to him good or bad." That's a hard order. And when God comes to you and says this, he's having no choice but to listen to God. But he puts on this whole hypocritical thing. Why did you steal off? I wanted to kiss my grandchildren. We could have had a big party. Bull crap. He would have never let Jacob go, and Jacob knew it. He would have ripped him off, sent him away without anything. But God's put the squeeze on him, as Chuck says, and isn't going to let him do anything. And he acts all hurt and offended and all this other stuff. And Jacob's like, "You go ahead and search." He didn't know that Rachel ripped off these two little teraphims, these two little idols. And I love how she's sitting on them. And she says, "I can't get up. The manner of women is on me. I'm weak. It's that time of the month." And now it's Jacob's chance to spout off and give Laban the chewing out he wants to give him. And I love what Laban gets here, what Jacob says here. He says here in Genesis 31, verses 36 to 38, "Then Jacob became very angry and argued with Laban. And Jacob said to Laban, 'What is my offense? What is my sin that you have hotly pursued me? Though you have searched through all my property, what have you found? What have you found of all your household property? Set it here in front of my relatives and your relatives so that they may decide between the two of us. For these 20 years I've been with you, your ewes and your female goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten the rams of your flocks.'" In other words, I haven't touched any of your stuff, but you've changed my wages 10 times. I would replace anything that you lost because of a beast eating it or whatever. I took the loss of it. I worked hard for you for 20 years. I've been in your house. I served you for 14 years for your daughters and 6 years for your cattle. You've changed my wages 10 times. And except the God of my father, the God of Abraham and the fear of Isaac, had been with me, surely you would have sent me away empty. But God has seen my affliction and the labor of my hands, and he rebuked you last night. He rebuked you last night. He's pissed. He's like, Jacob is like, "I spent all this time working for you. You gypped me 10 times. 10 times you changed my wages." And that's not counting, I think, concerning Rachel and Leah. He had it and he wanted to have it out with Laban once and for all, because this wouldn't ever happen again. So Laban, his whole thing still, he's like, "Well, these daughters, these daughters are my daughters, and these children are my children. These cattle are my cattle, and all that you see is mine. And what can I do this day unto these my daughters, and unto their children which they have borne? Now therefore come, let's make a covenant, you and I, and it'll be a witness between me and thee." In other words, he couldn't really say anything. "I can't do anything. I feel all of it's mine. I don't know by what right, but yet, he can't say squat." So they make this agreement, and I want to go into this agreement, okay? I want to share with this about this agreement, okay? Because like I said, they finally have their talk. They have it out. Laban just got chewed out by Jacob. And before they part ways, they make this interesting covenant. They make this very interesting covenant. They took a stone, set it for a pillar. Jacob said to his brother, "Gather stones." And they took the stones, made a heap of them. And Laban called it Jegar Sahadutha, but Jacob called it Gilead. He called it by the Hebrew name, where Jacob calls it by the Aramaic name. It's a heap of the heap of witnesses, basically, as Chuck Smith says. Laban's like, "This is a heap of witness. This heap is a witness between me and you today. So we'll call it Gilead or Mizpah." And I want to go into with you what Mizpah means, because I think you guys need to know. Okay, I hope you guys don't mind. I know I've been going on in this, but this is really important. Because something I learned a little bit, but something I want to share as well. Something that these things that I learned. They decided to call it Mizpah, and they make a very interesting covenant there because a Mizpah is that. It's this unique covenant. It's called a Mizpah, and it's got a very interesting meaning. According to gotquestions.org, the name Mizpah means a watchtower or lookout. Another interesting definition that I found online is it's a Hebrew term that refers to a symbolic agreement or covenant between two individuals with God as their witness. It's often marked by a physical act, such as the placement of stones to commemorate the promise or commitment, which is what both Jacob and Laban did here. Now, this agreement or covenant isn't what you think it is. Okay? It's not anything pleasant here. I want to make that very clear. They're going to call it Gilead and Mizpah, for he said, the Lord watch over you when we are absent one from the other. And if you will afflict my daughters, or if you will take other wives besides my daughters, no man is with us. Let God watch over you and witness between me and thee. And Laban said to Jacob, behold, this is the pillar that I have cast between me and you. This heap is a witness, and this pillar is a witness. I will not pass over this heap to you, and you won't pass over to me. In other words, this was like the property line, so to speak. You go your ways. You don't come my way. I'm not going to come near you. This is it. This is the separation. And it's interesting. It says here, the God of Abraham and the God of Nahor, the God of thy father, judge between us. And Jacob swore by the fear of his father Isaac. And then Jacob offered sacrifice upon the mount and called his brethren to eat bread. And they did eat bread and tarried all night in the mount. And early in the morning, Laban rose up, kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. And Laban departed and returned to his place. Now, I want to tell you what Mizpah is here, okay? This is not a Christian greeting. This is not anything pleasant. This is far from it, okay? I want to make sure I get this across. This is not some type of endearment. It's not a blessing. You know those little necklaces that you would see in the 90s? I think they still have them out. I used to have one from Piercing Pagoda. I still have a piece of mine, okay? It was anything but a blessing or some type of term of endearment. It was anything but that. I got blessed to go to Philadelphia College of Bible. It's now Cairn University. One of my late professors, Dr. Austin Potts, shared with us that this was not any type of blessing or a term of endearment, but a warning. Yeah, a warning. The basic warning was, number one, you better treat my daughters right. You better treat my daughters right. And I think the second one and the main thing here was, I may not know what you're doing, but God does, and God will deal with you if you do anything that violates this covenant or in any way harms anyone that I love. This wasn't directed also at Jacob. Jacob directed it back at Laban. Okay, this is like, I may not see what you're doing, but God does too. Remember that. It went both ways. Yes, this was at least on Laban's end, but it was also on Jacob's. Jacob directed this toward him too. He was like, fine, you go your way, I go mine. We never see each other again. Laban's only thing was, you treat my daughters right. And God be a witness between you and I. God will be watching everything you say and do. It's interesting. Wiersbe's commentary states that Mizpah was a monument to suspicion and fear, not to love and trust. And that is so extremely true. This wasn't anything loving. It wasn't anything kind. And I think when it comes to this, because this one question in particular, what does this statement, may the Lord watch between you and me when we are away from each other, say about God and how it might motivate a believer to walk with integrity? It should serve as a warning to any believer that God sees and knows all. And because of that, it should motivate us to want to make sure that we're living lives of integrity. I thought I'd share that with you guys because that was something that I learned about this. And I really hope that this blesses you guys. I hope that this challenges you. And I would really love your feedback on this. Please feel free to give me your feedback. I would really appreciate it. But I want to remind you guys that God watches what we say and do. He's omniscient, omnipresent, and yes, omnipotent. But he is forgiving and loving. And he gives us a warning here. And I pray that we consider that warning. I think one of the things that we need to consider especially is how we treat others, how our response is, especially when we see somebody that seems to be doing well, especially if it's somebody who's evil. They seem to be getting away with everything. And we kind of develop a bit of a major amount of jealousy. Envy is a horrible thing. It was envy and resentment that I believe motivated Laban to do what he did to Jacob. And the more he did it, the more God blessed Jacob. And I think he was still driven by that when 3 days later he found out that Jacob and his entire family left. And ultimately, as I said, Jacob finally got to tell him off. And Laban must have been blown away by it. How many of us have just had it up to our eyeballs with somebody who's taking advantage of us, and we just let them have it in some way? We verbally tell them off, or maybe with God's help, we're able to do something to get even the right way. Like maybe we take them to court. We expose whatever illegal thing they're doing, and they wind up going to jail. Seriously. I mean, it's just a couple of examples here. Ultimately here, both Jacob and Laban parted ways, and they weren't friends. They weren't friends and they weren't enemies. And I think this is a very important, and I'm really looking forward to going into this further as we go on and discuss more about Jacob, more about how he handles things in his life. Because we're going to come next to when he has that wrestling match. And I'm looking forward to that. You guys have a really great evening, okay? Please stay safe and sane out there. And please remember, most of all, that you are truly loved by an almighty God. Don't ever, ever forget that. Bye for now, guys. See you.